Welcome back to the Chicks in Charge podcast. I'm Malena Putnam, the CEO of Chicks in Charge, co-founder. And guess what? My co-founder is our guest boss chick today on the podcast, Jeanna Lichtenberger. Thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We are so excited about this series because we are big book lovers. We are lifelong learners. And this Read and Lead Book Club series is all about going back through the books that we've read. Every 2 months, we read a new one. And I ask the membership, what book really resonated with you? And for those of you who are on our YouTube channel, you can see the cutie picture of him right here. Today, we are talking about Greenlights with none other than Matthew McConaughey. And guess what, Jeanna? I'm wearing my shirt.
You are.
All right.
Oh, I'm jealous.
I wore to our book club that we hosted at your place. So I want to tell everyone a little bit about Jeanna from my perspective, and then I'll let Jeanna share some as well. But Jeanna and I met, and this was the genesis of Chicks in Charge, at a woman's co-working space. And we were working on a project back in 2017. And Jeanna was already a big leader in the essential oils community. And we were working on a project. And she was like, I want to get out there and meet more women. And I just feel like, it's all screen time. And heck, that was even before the pandemic when we were forced to be on the screen more. And so we came up with this idea to have this gathering of women, and it was around Easter time. It was spring. And so it was an adult Easter egg hunt, and we called it Chicks in Charge. And so the name stuck. Everyone thought it was, really cute and clever and all that. And that Easter egg hunt was fantastic, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was a blast. It was
we had it at a local brewery here in Edmond, Oklahoma. And it was indoor outdoor, and we had women have their little booths and products and services, and then all of our guests, which it was about 100 women, if I remember right.
Oh, yeah.
And so they got to hunt Easter eggs, and they were all prize eggs. And it was really a cool, fun way to get to know other women. And then what we realized is there was a real thirst for that. But for whatever reason, just, life kind of got in the way. We did not do another Easter egg hunt until this year. We're bringing it back.
Oh, yay.
I'm so excited about that. So Spring Fling with all of our chapters. So here, Frisco and Enid, we're doing the Easter egg hunt. So we're calling it Spring Fling, and it's in late April. So we're really pumped about that. But so that's how Jeanna and I met, was through that co-working space. I believe she has a very rebel spirit and a huge heart. And she is also an Enneagram. We're not sure 8 wing 7 or 7 wing 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Going back
I'm 7 wing 8. So we're always up for a good time, adventure, learning. And I believe that Jeanna really embraces a lot of the things that Matthew talks about in Greenlights. So for those of you who have not read the book, we all pretty much know who Matthew McConaughey is, right? He's an amazing actor with a huge list of achievements. And one of the things that I love most about this memoir is that he was someone who was so meticulous about taking notes about his life. He was a big diary/journal writer, and you can see those. He even has samples of them in the book. So if you get the hardback, or it's probably in paperback now too, but just how he was so intentional about that. So is that something, Jeanna, that you do in your life? Are you intentional about kind of journaling and going through your thoughts on paper?
I used to be. All of my life I have been, really, but when I went through a really hard season recently, I did more voice notes on my phone.
Okay.
I don't have the energy to write it all out right now, but I do have it all there so that I can transcribe it later. Yeah, I think it's really important. That's one of the things I loved about it too, is just everything. He sees everything as a learning opportunity and as a lesson to be learned, whether it's really, really hard or whether it's easy. it was just really inspiring to read about someone who has kind of the same mindset that you and I do. It seems to be rare. And I was just glad that it was out there and that it was him, because I know so many people will read it who maybe aren't inclined to be like, okay, well, this is hard, but what's the lesson in it? What's the silver lining? And maybe if they read about how Matthew McConaughey was able to do that, they'll be inspired to do it themselves.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that is why I do not mind at all celebrities sharing their views on things, because they do have an audience, and they're people and they have thoughts, they have experiences that are beyond what their celebrity is. And I do believe that people reading this book thought, wow, who knew that Matthew was such a deep thinker, right? I mean, did you know that about him?
No, I mean, he was pretty much, I mean, he even says he was pigeonholed into the rom-com genre for a really long time. So we all just thought he, and also with his first role with Dazed and Confused, I mean, we all just, your shirt, everything. It's just like, it was very surprising to hear how introspective he is. And
and so let's go through some of our favorite stories and lessons from the book. And then I'd love to hear how maybe any of them impacted and resonated with you about your personal and professional life. What was one of the, and here it's been what, two or 3 years since we read the book, at least a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
So what has been the lasting impact of a story that you read in the book?
Oh my goodness. There are so many. I feel like I could talk about it all day long, but one of the funniest and best parts of the book to me was whenever he was an exchange student in Australia with he was with a family, a very unconventional family. I mean, it was kind of a nightmare situation. It was very much a nightmare situation. Even with my power of positive thinking, I don't know that I could have withstood what he withstood.
Agreed.
Just all the things that he had to go through, and just having such a, like, I'm going to do it. I had a handshake on it. He promised he would stay there for a year, no matter what. He was supposed to sign a contract. Later, he figures out why he was supposed to sign that contract, but he said, I'm not going to sign a contract, but you can trust my handshake. And he did it. And he then went on to say that, like, it was the, what did he say? I wrote it down because I love it so much. He said, the suffering and loneliness that he experienced forced him to become introspective and really figure out who he was. And he also realized that he hadn't really gone through anything hard. I mean, he had, like, in the grand scheme of things, whenever we look at his upbringing and his family and all the things that he went through, he had gone through a lot by today's standards, especially whenever everyone's identifying by their upbringing and, what their parents, their trauma from their parents and all that. He could have framed it that way. He could have definitely framed it that way. But he looked at his life and saw, I was good looking. I had a great car. I had no curfew. I had all this stuff going for me. And then I chose to come here, and I've never been more lonely, and trapped. He goes to Australia thinking he's going to be on a beach. Was nowhere near the beach. I don't even know if he ever saw the beach except for driving by it. But then he's like, it changed him. Like, fundamentally, it changed him. Some personalities would have allowed it to destroy them, or they would have just left. And he let it really sink in. And, like, he went introspective. He started writing pages and pages of his journal and letters home. And yeah, it was phenomenal. And then to find out at the very end, right before he comes back, after being there 364 days, that everyone was like, how did you stay in that house for so long? Like, it ended up being like a big joke. And he was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, he realized that, oh yeah, not every Australian family is like that he really did get a very quirky, family. And the fact that he didn't want to eat their food. And then what did he do that? And he got so skinny. And it was just like, yeah, you're reading it going, I felt the same way. I do not think that I could have done it.
Yeah.
And so that just shows right from the get-go, from a young person, how much resilience he had. And I don't even know if it's really the power of positive thinking. He definitely did, but it's more like, almost like a grit to him, that he has the grit to be like, it's not just about being positive for him. I think it was, I'm going to be mentally tough. And he did become really mentally tough, because then look at all the things that happened to him after that, as we watch. And that's what I love about this book. We're on this journey with him, kind of through all the ups and downs, and, huge stardom. And then being, as you mentioned, pigeonholed in the rom-com, because he was very good looking, and you're going to chase the money, or I should say, if people that want to use you for the money because it was so successful. So even when he had that power from being in the rom-coms, and you're thinking, well, if I had any agency over my career and my voice, this would be the time, right? Mm-hmm. But that it didn't happen for him that way. He said, I don't want to do it. And his producers and handlers and all that said, well, this is what we're offering you. You get this script, whereas he wanted those deep thinking scripts, which he ended up getting. He ended up getting himself out of it. But that's what I loved about it, is that it took him a long time to be able to go through that process. And yet he stuck with it. He could have said, oh, well, I guess that's who I am. That's what the world wants of me. So I'm just going to be a rom-com stud and do that. And that's not what he did. So one of the favorite stories that I have from the book is, throughout, he goes on all of these excursions that are pretty outlandish. You almost think about them being in biblical terms, right? Like that you think of people going out in the desert and barefoot and all that. He almost did things like that. So one of the big stories in the book was when he went to the jungle, and you're reading it thinking, is this true? It's so outlandish but I believe it. Knowing him the way that we do now, I can believe that someone like him would do that, because he does like a challenge. And talk about being in the jungle, floating, and he's having all these visions, and that he runs into these tribes, and it just goes on and on from there. But in each time, he has these big aha moments that happen, and that's huge. And so just the fact that he would let himself go through that and then find that. Did you have trouble in the book believing his wild stories, or what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, they were outlandish, but I just didn't have trouble. One, it helps that he read it. I mean, it's his voice, and he's just so relatable. And I mean, he just seemed like an honest guy. Like, you can just trust him. But I love that. And I love how he was challenged to fight, because he said that he was a fighter, and he stepped up and did it. And then he found out that he won just because he agreed to do it, because no one else would agree to do it. I mean, he wasn't a big man. Like, he wasn't, there's no way he could have won, but he did it anyway. I mean, you're right. I mean, I wonder sometimes when I'm reading it, the whole time I'm thinking he has to be like a 7-8 or an 8-7 too, because eights love a good challenge. I mean, we want to be challenged. And so I don't know. Yeah. I love that. I love all of his little adventures. But I also love, like, whenever going back to, like, whenever he had to take some different roles, or whenever he didn't have any roles offered to him, I love how he thinks about that time as, like, that was his time to like start his real dream, which was being a father. Like, the only thing he ever wanted was to be a dad, really. And so then that gave him time to really focus on his family. And it's like, no matter what happens, even if it is a hardship, he just frames it in a way that he looks for the best. He looks for the silver lining, like, every single time. Like, well, this will give me time to focus on this, instead of, like you said, taking lesser roles or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I love that. And one of the pages that I have up right now is towards the end of the book, where he actually shares his list of his 10 goals in life. And so I think for the listeners and the viewers today is to, first of all, ask yourself, have I ever identified what my goals in life are? Because if we're going to live a life of intention and we want to fulfill our purpose, or even find what that purpose is, it does start with that introspection and starting with a list. And it's not that your list can't change over time, but you can look at that and say, well, right now, this is what I feel like I want my goals in life to be. And knowing that there'll be some setbacks and ebb and flow. So I'm going to share with you all what the 10 goals in life were. And because you just said this, his number one, become a father. And if you all watch him on Instagram, he shares all that. I think the one I saw yesterday was he was giving one of his sons a haircut, and family is hugely important to him. Number two, find and keep the woman for me. I mean, how cool is that? And Camilla is such a good partner for him. And so that's fun to watch them. And again, yeah, social media, you can paint whatever picture you want, but I feel like they show some real moments, some real tenderness, and because he does get on there and almost share his life with us through some of his commentary, I feel like that to me feels really authentic. Number three, keep my relationship with God. Number four, chase my best self. And he does that. And that's what I feel like the whole journey is he's sharing that with us, how he's trying to chase being his best self and challenging that. Number five, be an egotistical utilitarian. Number six, take more risks. Like you said, I think he's a big risk taker. Number seven, stay close to mom and family. And again, he has done that. I mean, you guys, he wrote this, okay, in 1992. And here we are, and we see all the moments that he spends with his mom, and they have videos with his mom still in it. So that he still fulfilled that. Number eight, win an Oscar for Best Actor. He said that in 1992 when he was just starting out, and he's the rom-com boy, right? And you really don't win Oscars much for rom-coms. You know what I mean? So he knew that he was going to have to really step up and do that. Number nine, look back and enjoy the view. Number 10, just keep living. And he ends a lot of his videos online with that, just keep living. I love that. So let me ask you, Jeanna, have you done something like this? Like, have you articulated what some of your goals in life are, written those down, and how's that going?
I have, and I've done it over and over, over and over. And they've changed. A lot of them have changed, but a lot of them have remained the same. And it's really great at this age. I mean, I'll be 50 this year. And so like looking back and like you said, looking back and enjoying it. I mean, like I can look back and enjoy even the hard times. I mean, I've been through a lot in my life, but just like he has, but there's so much beauty in it. And there is so much beauty in having the intention of like setting out your intentions of what you want to be, knowing who you are. Like he makes a big point in the book about just knowing who you are. And you have to know who you are before you make a list like this. Like you really have to know who you are, what your values are. And he says that that's just the base for every single thing. Everything in life comes from knowing who you are and being able to stand in your power and living what you believe, owning your thoughts and owning like all of the consequences, being responsible for your own actions. Like, I think the very best thing about this book for me was just the personal, I don't know the word for it, just accountability or autonomy. What's the word you use a lot? I can't remember. I've got it on the tip of my tongue, but just being in control of your life, agency, like just being in complete control of your life, and just knowing that and owning it and not putting it off on other people and not blaming, not always looking for, well, I am this way because of this in a negative way, and playing the victim. There is not one time in this book, even when he's describing watching his parents in a physical altercation, and talking about how his dad broke his mom's finger, like however many times because she was in his face. He never talks about it as if it was a trauma and he's victim of it. It's always just like, this is how they were. They loved hard. They fought hard. Everything, he spins it in a way that is just so accepting of people for like their humanity and who they are, and accepting his own role in it. Even the fact that the boys in the family had to like stand up and fight their dad to like prove their manhood. There are a lot of people, especially in today's world, that would be just horrified and then hang that as a banner over them for the rest of their life of why they couldn't, succeed, or they couldn't, be who they wanted to be because, this happened to me. He uses it. I mean, he had respect for it even, which is so, and even his mom, like you talked about being so close with his mom, even after he got famous and she tried to exploit the fact that she was his mom and get money for it. I mean, in the National Enquirer or one of those magazines or whatever, she was like giving them secrets. He still is just like, she's my mom. I love her.
Yeah.
He just,
And I think that I think he did separate himself a little bit from her at some points, and there was some estrangement and all that, which we all know that is so normal in families, of that there are times that you're going to feel close to people. There are times that you're like, I just can't deal with you right now. And that's what I love, that he's so real about it, real and raw. And you said the word that completely popped in my mind when you were sharing that story about his family, is acceptance. That we can't move forward if we don't first accept, okay, this is the reality. Now, what am I going to do with it? And we always have a choice what to do. And so he accepts it, and he was able to move through it and work through it. And like you said, he's not ever taking that victim mentality, but also but it's also not about putting our head in the sand and saying that bad things didn't happen to me. He's sharing that and saying these are hard times. And so we're not at all discounting people's trauma that they've had and all that, but it's like, what are we going to do with it? And here's the other thing that just popped in my mind, Jeanna, is at the beginning of the book, I forgot that this was sort of his birthday gift to himself when he turned 50. So he's looking back on his 50 years of living. You're about to be 50. I'm still 50 until April 14th. And so I've done this too, where I looked back and reflected. A couple of months ago, I was thinking, I've really achieved. I don't have a list of the goals that I wrote when I was young, but I definitely was a journaler, and I had a big diary. I would give anything to have those diaries back. They were not as eloquent as what he does here. I do recall writing down in 6th grade, like how many pieces of pizza I'd eaten. I have no idea why I would ever want to catalog that. But I do remember that the goals in life that I had as a little girl, about being a mom, about not only that, being a mom who was really active and close to my children, and really working on that relationship, because I was not raised by my biological mom. And I tried over the years to reestablish that relationship, and it was just unhealthy. So we are not at all saying on this that, because he was able to do that and work through that. I mean, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. In my situation, it didn't end up that I could get back and have a relationship with my biological mom, but I was also not raised by her. And so I think that all these things that he's sharing with us about living your legacy, and that's what he ends the book with, that living your legacy. It's like, what is our legacy? And if we don't take the time, as you said, to be self-aware, to understand what that is, that's why I think I am so big into personality types. And I know you love that too, that we look into, and not just Enneagram, there's a whole bunch of them. And when you put them all together, it does help us formulate this idea of, where does our energy come from? Why do we think the things that we think? And then, yes, look at how our childhood and adolescence and early adulthood and early relationships, and then add on to that some science and psychology of understanding your attachment style. That's really a big one, because often people that have unhealthy attachment styles, if they're anxious, or if they're, what's the other one where you're detached? The what?
Avoidant.
Yeah, avoidant. Yeah, that's what the official is. So avoidant. It's like all that. The more that we can understand that, we go, oh, that's why I had that, because my early attachment to my caregiver was this, and then this led to this. So again, that's not about saying, oh, I must be a terrible person then. It's just understanding that was our reality. And I did have a very anxious attachment style. And so whenever I put those goals in, that was my dream of like, wow, what would it look like to have a healthy relationship, and to have children that know that they can depend on me, because I had a lot of abandonment issues, thinking that, my partner was going to leave, my family would leave me, all that. And what did that turn? It turned into me becoming a perfectionist. Well, if I am the good girl, then no one will leave me, and all that. So understanding all those things that happen to you in your life and why, and then what can we do about it? And for me, I thought it's education, it's learning. And so now that I learn how to overcome that and let me feel my feelings, which is hard because feelings can be hard. And I think he encourages us to take that journey with yourself and to think about, what legacy do you want to leave? And he did not want to just leave a legacy of being a rom-com star. And thankfully he didn't, because we have all of these amazing movies that he created later that really challenged him to be the best actor that he could, to pull in every emotion that he could. And that was really cool. And him going out in the desert, it seems like he was always seeking guidance too. He was very open to that. He was open to messages from God, messages from the universe, looking for connections. And I think that's really powerful too.
Yes. Totally agree. I mean, and I totally agree with being introspective. And it's not about just the positive thinking. It's not about flipping every single thing. It's not about just always flipping the script. I mean, you have to really look at it in order to be able to flip the script with integrity and in a way that will impact your life. You have to acknowledge the reality of it. It's just, do you own it? Do we own it as a victim? Do we look at it as a victim, and do we define ourselves by our victimhood and what we experienced? Or do we look at it and say, this is the reality of what I experienced, and I am going to make a different life, like you said, with your, I mean, I've done the same thing with my family, with my kids, and we have similar, it's interesting that we have similar tendencies in that area too. But yeah, like it's more about looking at it realistically, calling it what it is, but then also looking for, what's the lesson in this, instead of, I'm going to define myself by this.
Yeah.
I think
and I think it's interesting because I had written a book called Family Charms about my experience. It was me processing all of my emotions for what it was like to not ever know where your mother was, and to feel like, oh, she's out there. And so for me, that's why I became a fiction writer for a while. So I sort of consider my past life now, because I don't write fiction anymore, but it helped me in dealing with my emotions and my thoughts over that. And I remember when I had reconnected with my mother later, and the book had already come out and she had not read the book. And I said, I really think you should. It's actually it's a better representation, and it makes you look better than what real life did, because that's what the beauty of a fiction novel can be. But I think we're so scared about processing those things. And what does that mean to go through all of the hard things and talk about it? But I have to say, I appreciate being reconnected with my mom for the time that I did, because it did give me a better understanding of who she was and the things that she had gone through. And I know it's hard. It's really hard to be a young mom. She was a young mom. She had 3 kids by the time she was 20. I mean, I can't imagine that, or 21 maybe. She had me when she was 16. She'd already miscarried twin boys before that. And my sisters and I are each a little over a year apart. That's hard. And to come from a background where she didn't feel supported, and on and on and on. So then I can say, instead of thinking, oh, this person is terrible because of how things ended up, I can have grace for that and say, first of all, I just appreciate that I was able to look at that and give it a chance and see how I could take that experience and how I could be a better mother whenever it was my time. And I did need to learn how to overcome my abandonment issues. I did have to learn how to be strong and let go of fear. And that's something, man, that I still work on a little bit. I'm not going to say that I'm fearless. I think some fear is probably good, but it's really helped me in dealing with that head on instead of just ignoring it. So I appreciate that that we're bringing that up, because I know that a lot of people out there have gone through that. Maybe they're going through a hard time now or in the past, but to say, let's look at the reality and what we can do to overcome it, to move through it, to get some help through it. And there's always help out there in one way or another.
Definitely.
You know, the thing too about living his legacy and what he's saying about the green lights, and this is what we want all the listeners to know, is to look for the green lights in your life. And what are you giving yourself permission to do? Or are you only looking at the red lights, the things that are stopping you? So in your life, Jeanna, what are some of the green lights that you've given yourself to say, I'm going to go for this? Can you think of those?
I have a tendency to make green lights even if there's a red light. So I have to be intentional about recognizing whenever something is actually a red light, because if I decide I'm going to do something, then I pretty much give myself green light to do anything that I want to do. So I have to be careful about that. But I think just mostly in this season and in the past like 5 years, probably just giving myself permission to just fully be myself, to fully like own who I am, not only for myself and professionally, but like in front of my children, in front of the team that I lead, in front of the people that I work with here at Well Okay, like just completely be myself. And I all my life would have said, because of my rebellious spirit, like you said, I would have said that I was just doing just that. But I was doing it more out of the rebellious spirit, which can be confrontational and which can invite, that it's
right.
I like a good challenge, like step up to me, challenge me, and let's have a debate about it. But I have learned to soften that and to accept who I am and what I am and what I believe and value and what's most important, without having to convince anyone else, without having to have dialogue about it, without having to make excuses or anything. Just like, this is who I am. This is what I believe. This is what I'm going to do. And it's okay if you disagree with me. I'm still going to do it. I don't let anything limit me. Like if I before I would very much allow the perceptions of my parents still, or my spouse, or even my kids to be like, I don't know if you need to be, if I would allow their fear to impact me. And I don't really do that anymore. But I also have an open mind to be able to hear what they're sharing with me and take it under advisement in a way that before I didn't.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really good. Being open to the feedback is really important. And a few things that you touched on there. I love that. Yes, you have that rebellious spirit, but the fact that you've gone through and you've learned what's going to work and what's not going to work in that, and being open to the feedback, so that then, not to say that we're not saying we're being authentic. It's more about the emotional intelligence to say, well, this is who I'm around right now. I love that, the other book that we're reading right now is cues on our verbal and nonverbal cues and behaviors, and the way that we speak, our expressions on our face, all of those things. I think the more that we're aware of that, and that we can be open to, when I'm talking to you, if I were, having this, you would respond me like, oh, she's not agreeing or liking what I'm saying right now. For those of you, I was making a really crazy face. So all of that is good. And I think that's why we're here, is to keep learning and growing and developing and being aware of some of those things. I know one of the things that Matthew says in the book, one of his little notes that he had made, was, some people want the AC on in the gym so they won't sweat. I wear my beanie in July, so I will. I love that. Like, yes. And so what I want to leave our audience with today is just the reminder that we do have the agency to control what happens in our lives, and we can at the very least control our response to what happens, because yes, we can't control everything out there, but we can control our thoughts about it. We can really regulate how we're going to respond, whether that's, taking a break because we know we're going to be really have an emotional response to something, and to really put in the work. Because if we're talking about living a legacy, that just because we know that we want it to happen doesn't mean it's going to be easy. And I think that Matthew does a really effective job of showing us that just because you're famous doesn't mean you're going to get what you want. Just because you grew up in a, posh life doesn't mean that you're going to get what you want. And then for us as leaders to look at that and say, am I listening to my people? Am I listening to what they want? One of my biggest pet peeves is, well, just the phrase, because I said so. It's like, that's a very controlling phrase that parents shouldn't say, leaders shouldn't say it. It's like, we want our children and our followers, our fans, our employees, our coworkers to believe that they have a voice and that everything is up for discussion. And for us to be able to explain why we believe something is a great challenge too. But to know that everyone's going to think differently than us, and we're not all, that word sheep, that all, think the same things, do the same things, all that. And I think that's the beauty of humankind and showing grace, and that we can be friends with people who are different than us, and that there are people out there who are going to love you and support you and empower you and let you be you, instead of saying, I want you to be the way that I want you to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think this is a perfect book too. I mean, I loved reading it in this season of my life, but I also had my oldest kids read it. So Jesse was 16 when I had him read it. And this is one of those books that, like, 10 years ago, I would have been horrified if a parent would have told me that they would have, like, asked their 16-year-old to read this book. But I was like, as soon as I read it, I was like, you have to read this. I mean, I listened to it on audio, then I bought the hard copy, and I was like, which one do you want to do? And it was so impactful for him. I think to get it in the hand, the whole idea of it, everything that he has to talk about, I think is important at the beginning of your journey. Like, not that necessarily they'll listen to it. We always think
right,
they will, but then I had my daughter, who is 2 years older than him, read it. I mean, and they quote it all the time. And one thing I quote to them, which is kind of funny, but I always, because my kids, I mean, and we all feel this way about our children, but I really do think that all my children are just beautiful and stunning and amazing. And so I'll always be like, your looks will only get you so far. Your looks will get you a seat at the table, just like Matthew McConaughey says.
Right.
Your looks and your personality will get you a seat at the table. Then you have to prove yourself. And so they're always like saying that to each other, and so many little quotes out of this book. It's just so good. I just love it so much.
It is good. So we will have a link in the show notes for information about the book, so that you guys can, if you want to learn more, dive into it. Of course, Jeanna and I both highly recommend that you take the time to, really gift yourself this. That's what I would say. I think that a lot of personal development is really, not only do I think it's essential for our growth, but it's also a gift that we give ourselves. It's a way to have self-care, is to let ourselves have this time. That's something that's just for you, to read a book that you can step into someone else's life, but yet so much of what they say will resonate with you, and see what that is. And just the things that come up from it, I think will be really powerful. And so whether you prefer audiobook or to read, I also like even just having things on the Kindle, because it lets you highlight, and then you can share it with people in your life. I do the same thing, Jeanna, where I'll highlight something, and then I'll send it to my kids and say, just, if this resonates with you today, like, was just on my heart and my mind to share, because our children and our young employees and all that, they're at the beginning of this. So, wow, think about if they captured this feeling and this power of, like, I can decide where I want my life to go, everything from how I choose to spend my time, my career, where I want to live, who I want to spend time with, being around, healthy people that are supportive and make me feel good about myself, which is why we love Chicks in Charge so much too, because we know we can step in there and find women that are going to help challenge us and cheer for us, which I think it takes both things so that we can grow to be our best self, which was one of the things that was on Matthew's life list. And we encourage everyone to take some time this week and create that goal list for you. It doesn't matter if you're 20, 50, 70, there's still time to do those things that you always wanted to do. One of our chicks, Beth Hill, who is a travel agent, I noticed on today, she was saying one of her dreams was to be in an Egyptian boat sailing the Nile, and she's doing it today.
Wow.
And it was so cool. And I'm like, and she's, our age. And so don't give up on your dreams. Don't give up on yourself. And of course, as leaders, we can help other people step into their power and help them with their dreams too, which is just a beautiful thing that we can do for each other. So thank you so much, Jeanna, for, first of all, helping bring Chicks in Charge to life, for being such an empowering and beautiful leader yourself, and just a beautiful spirit. I just always feel better whenever I'm around you, honestly. And so I'm excited that other people could get to see you and hear you today too.
Oh, thank you. I feel the same way about you. You know that.
Okay. All right. We'll talk to you guys again next week with another book.